Welcome to our second platform training. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a well-rounded foundational knowledge of the platform, enough to finalize an amazing first doc. First on the agenda for today, we're going to jump into responsive design, so that all your readers can enjoy your content. Next, we'll talk about templates, to easily put Foleon Docs together in the future. And finally, we're going to cover additional settings and features that can help bring your Foleon Doc to life. Let's get started. So first, let's talk about responsive design. Responsive design means that the content that you create is optimized to be viewed on different devices, such as desktop, tablet, and mobile. You'll want to take responsive design into account during the creation process of your Foleon Doc to save yourself a lot of time later. Different devices have different sized screens. These differences affect the way that the content looks in the editor in the different respective view modes. As you can see, in the example on the left, as the screen scales down for different device view modes, we start to lose a lot of that real estate, and eventually the corners also get cut off. And then there's even further cropping on mobile. This is because the image, which has a landscape orientation, is being forced into a portrait frame. Alternatively, portrait-style images which are brought into the editor will look proportionate on mobile, but will be scaled up and cropped for desktop in order to fill the block. In terms of cropping your imagery for the appropriate view modes, we do have recommended sizes, which are on screen now. Here's how you can handle responsive design when working on a page. To add a background image, I'm going to go to the block settings and hit Change Background. Now I'm going to select a background image from our media library. This is a nice image to select because the composition is already set up so that our image won't overlap our text. Now let's see how this looks on tablet and mobile. The columns which were next to each other are now stacked vertically on top of each other. This has changed the orientation of our text box as well. One important thing to note is that changes you make on desktop will apply to desktop, tablet, and mobile. Changes you make on tablet will apply to tablet and mobile, and changes you make on mobile will only apply there. But we still need to do something about this image. Next, we're going to want to create a new crop of our image so that it's more center on the page. So let's jump into Replace Background Image for the block. Now let's find our image. We're going to hit Crop here. And from here, we can change this crop, or we can choose a square ratio. I'm choosing to crop off a little bit at both ends, just so that it's more even. When cropping an image, it actually creates a copy. Now let's add it. We could even center format our text element, and it'll only apply to tablet and mobile. Another responsive feature which is often overlooked is the ability to change the typography from the theme settings for a specific view mode. As you probably know by now, the theme settings control the font stylings that you're able to use throughout your doc. But what you might not have noticed yet is that you can fine-tune the theme settings for a specific view mode. So if I jump into tablet view mode, you'll see that the header is actually different than the desktop one. We can fine-tune that to something more appropriate. Just remember, any changes you make to an individual text element will break the authority that the theme settings have over it. So if I go into this heading 1 here, and I change this to 35 points, it's breaking the link that this font size has in connection to the theme settings. So if I jump back into the theme, you'll notice that the size is no longer linked to the theme settings. A common challenge that comes up when dealing with responsive view modes is background images getting lost on tablet and mobile. Let me return to page 2 here. So if we look at page 2 in mobile view mode, we lose our background image. So here's what it looks like on desktop. We have a background image with a scrollable column here. But when we switch to tablet, that column is now covering the entire width of the page. Part of the image is shown below. And on mobile, again, the entire image is sort of covered up by this white column with text. So as a workaround for this, we're actually going to add this background image as an image element and have it only be visible on tablet and mobile view modes. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Elements panel here. I'm going to add an image element on top. So now, if we switch back to our tablet view mode, we see our image front and center. We can even add a little bit more spacing here. And on mobile, we see our image front and center as well. And just to make sure that our background image isn't showing behind it, we can hide the visibility here, hide the visibility here. And we're going to want to hide the image visibility for our desktop view mode. So now it's only going to show our image element where we need it, here and here. So now we have an appropriate workaround to always have relevant content visible from all view modes. In order to check how your doc will look on different viewports, there's one easy shortcut you can use by inspecting your preview page. So on the preview page, if you right-click, Inspect, we can now select what device we want to view our screen mode in. Another great use of the visibility feature is the ability to create alternate blocks for the different responsive view modes. On desktop, we really like the way that this title looks, but when we get to mobile, it looks like maybe it's just too much text. So maybe for the mobile view mode specifically, we want to change the title to something else. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to try creating an alternate block. So by this, I mean, let's duplicate our cover block here. And now for this second cover block, we're going to change the title to something simpler. We'll call this Platform Training 2. Now what I'm going to do is for our duplicate block here, this is the one that I want to show only on tablet and mobile. So I'm going to go into the visibility and I'm going to say hide on desktop. And I'm going to go into the visibility of the first block, our original cover block, go into the settings, and we're going to change this to hide on tablet and hide on mobile. So now if we view our doc and we scale it down, the title changes. I think we're going to need to make some more changes here to our tablet view mode, but as you can see, this is already a great start. After every completed page, try to check the page on tablet and mobile immediately. It'll save you time in the end. This is especially true if you're working with template pages or template blocks. Now let's talk about templates. You can save nice looking pages, blocks, and overlays to reuse later. This will speed up your future Foleon Doc creation time. As an example, let's save this block from earlier. First we need to make sure that it looks nice on all the different view modes before saving. By ensuring that our template block is already optimized for the different viewports, will save us a ton of time later by not having to manually optimize every time we use the template block. Now let's save our block. If we go to the block settings tab here, we'll see this button that says Save as Template. By selecting Save as Template, we can give it a name. So for now we'll call this Text with Background Image, and next we're asked to select a category. Categories are a great way to keep your templates organized based on specific applications or use cases. So we know that this type of block is general content design, so let's call this main content blocks. Now that we have saved it, we can easily bring it into any doc in the future by going to the blocks on the side, and under Team Templates, we'll see our categories. So here we have main content blocks, and there's our block. We can drag it in to any doc that we create in the future. Aside from blocks, we can also save pages and overlays as templates. If I jump up here to the Pages tab, and we hover over any of our pages, we'll see this ability to save a page as a template, just like we did for the block. In addition to that, we can also save overlays as templates. Overlays are pop-up pages, and they can be saved the same way. All of your templates can be managed from the dashboard, under the Templates tab. From here, you can see your pages, blocks, and overlays. Bear in mind that basic customers don't have the template manager. And also, different roles within your account settings have different abilities. which can be managed from the Users tab. You can edit templates from the Template Manager. Next, I'll talk about the Embed element. The Embed element is an awesome tool to bring in some external interactivity into your doc. Some common uses we see are Google Maps or social media posts. So here on this page, I'll show you how to bring in a Google Map as an Embed element. Let's decide where we're going to put the Embed element. I think maybe right here where we have this column image. So I'm going to remove the image and empty this column. And next, I'm going to need to copy a link to add into the Embed element. So here on Google Maps, I have one of Foleon's office locations. I'm going to hit Share here, and then under Share, I'm going to hit Embed a Map. From here is where we can find that HTML link that we need. I'm going to copy this HTML, and I'm going to return back to our doc. So here's the interesting part about this. We don't actually need the entire HTML code, we actually just need the iframe source URL. So in order to get that from our HTML here, I'm going to paste it in the box over here and highlight the part that we actually need, which is this iframe source URL. Just to make that more apparent, I'm going to bold it as well. But now I'm going to hit Command C and copy it. And now I'm going to drag in our Embed element. Hit save, and just like that, now we have a Foleon map interactive from Google brought into our Foleon doc. How neat! As you could probably tell, the possibilities are endless with the amount of things that you can bring into Foleon using the Embed element. Some common applications we see are people who bring in data visuals and infographics from places like Infogram or Flourish. But also, to that point of adding infographics, Foleon also has some data visualization elements. So let's talk about those. Maybe under this quote block, we want to have some data visualizations. So I'm going to duplicate the block and remove the content from inside of it. Next, I want to make sure that there's 3 even columns inside. So I'm going to hit Add Column twice and see that that's space divided evenly between the 3. Now we can bring in some data visualization elements. So down under Elements, if we scroll down here, you'll see we have a counter, a progress bar, and a circle. So let's just drag these in. 1, 2, 3. So these data elements will actually animate in when that part of the page loads. So just like a text element, we can click on the number to edit the font. We can see that the styling bar appears at the top here. So from here, let's change this to white. Let's also change the size down to 65. And there's also additional features we can add as well. If we jump into the data settings here, into general settings, we can change this value to anything we want. So if we wanted this to be a very large number, we can do that. We'll just have to make sure that it fits on one line. So let's make this even smaller, down to 50. We can also add a prefix or suffix. So this is a symbol that can go before or after the number. So if we wanted this to have a prefix, it could have a dollar symbol there. We can also add a suffix. If we wanted it to be a ridiculously large number, we can add a K or an M for million. So there's a lot of possibilities here. We can add a comma after 3 zeros. And these changes can also be made to the progress bar and the circle as well. For the circle and the progress bar, we're also able to change the colors associated with it. So we can pull from our brand colors down here. And let's also set up our circle here as well. Unfortunately, the data visuals are not part of the theme, which means that you'll need to edit them manually every time you bring them in. But just know that as a best practice, you can duplicate a data element and then change out the number so you don't need to redo the formatting for it every time. And additionally, if you already have a block set up with data visual elements in it, you can save that block as a template so that you don't need to redesign from scratch every single time you use a data visual. The next feature that I'd love to go over is the hotspot. A hotspot is a type of button that links to a pixel in the block background image. Hotspots are free to be placed wherever you want as long as you have a background image on the block. Let's go about creating a hotspot map from scratch. Let's start with a new page. First, we have to determine what the background image for this block will be. A great way to use a hotspot is on a map type of environment. So we're going to use a map. So I'm going to go and replace this background image with a map that I have here. And now we have a block background image of a map. Let's see if we can customize this a little bit more based on our existing brand. Now let's bring in a hotspot. So here's an example of a hotspot. It's a circular button that has a custom menu, just like any other button. We can go into the general settings and choose if we wanted to link somewhere. We can also add a custom graphic to our hotspot if we wanted to as well. We can adjust the background color, the border, the shadow, and the visibility. They can also have a hover state, just like regular buttons. Custom hotspot images can't be set up through the theme settings, so if we want to create more hotspots like this and not work from scratch every time, we can duplicate our hotspot. So now I roughly have one placed in Rome and one placed in London. So let's create blocks for these hotspots to link to. So I'm going to actually use our block linking feature, and I'm going to add blocks below. And now I'll duplicate this. Now if we return up here, and we go to the link settings for our button, and edit link, we can choose to link it to a page, an overlay, basically anything you can link a regular button to. But we actually want to link it to another block on the page. Now we're going to select block, and since I selected England first, I'm going to select that block below. And then I'll do the same thing for our other block here. So now, if we preview this, and we select our hotspot, it'll take us to the appropriate block below. You may have noticed that our hotspots are sort of centralized on this page. But what would happen if we added a hotspot over here in the United States? Well, if we switch to our tablet view mode, it's almost getting cut off. And if we switch to our mobile view mode, it's definitely getting cut off. So this is something that we need to keep in mind while working with hotspots, is that since they're attached to a pixel in the background image of the block, as that image scales appropriately for the different devices, you may lose your hotspots off the sides. So one workaround for this is to create an alternate block for the different view modes. This doc by AIDA is a great example of using an alternate block with hotspots. Here on this illustration of ships, we have hotspots for more information. But if we switch our browser size down to something closer to a tablet or a mobile viewport, you'll notice that the hotspots switch to an alternate block where there's buttons underneath the image. So now the hotspots, which wouldn't fit on this image as it scales smaller, are now relegated to actual buttons that stack inside the column. This is an excellent example of how to use alternate blocks to achieve an optimal viewing experience for the different viewports. Now that we have 5 pages created, let's create a block that can bring us back to our first page. We're going to make a footer. A footer is a block that goes at the bottom of a page. A footer block can be used as an additional form of navigation, linking to the next page or the prior page. So now we're going to add a simple footer block to link us back to our first page. And just like that, we have a simple linear way to get back to our first page. And as you can see, just by duplicating this column and switching the name of a button, I can make it so that it links to the prior page as well as the next page. So there's a lot you can do with that, but it's a very handy way to navigate through the doc and creates more of a linear experience for the readers. Instead of another button, additionally, we can also add elements of our brand identity into the footer. Some companies also like to put their contact info in the footer as well. So now I'm going to show how to use advanced linking to link your email and your phone number in the footer. First, we're going to need to add a text element. So I'm going to duplicate the one we have, and I'm going to call this one Contact Us. Here, let's left align the content here. But now I'm going to make the second one say telephone, and then duplicate that again. And this one will say email. And maybe for some more hierarchy, we can move this to paragraph, change that to white. Also change this text styling to paragraph. Let's choose white. So now under telephone, I'm going to highlight the word telephone, and then from the text styling, I'm going to hit insert link. This is going to generate a text link, and I'm going to link it to an external URL. And in order to have it so that it links to your telephone number, what we're going to type in is TEL, and then type in your number. Now, when somebody hits the word telephone, it's going to link to the telephone number. Additionally, we can do this with email as well. Now let's set up the email. So if we highlight the word email, and we go up to insert link, and we go and change to external URL, and for this we're going to type in mail to, and then we're going to type in our email. Now just like that, if a user selects either of these, it'll link respectively to their telephone or to the email that's set up there. Super useful to know about. Now to circle back, there's one other feature that I'd love to show today, and that's the ability to make a narrow overlay. If you remember, an overlay is a page on top of a page. When we look at an example of an overlay, there's always margins around it. And there's margins around it because that's what distinguishes an overlay from a regular page. It's a pop-up. It's a page that comes up on top of another page. But you might have felt kind of limited because the overlay seems to be a fixed size. But this isn't entirely true. There is actually a way to make an overlay smaller. So you can have a smaller overlay pop-up. And this is what we call a narrow overlay. So to create a narrow overlay, first we need to go into the overlay settings. Now we go into the background settings, and for background color, we're going to set the background color to 0A channel. This stands for alpha, or the transparency. From here we can also set the color overlay if we wanted to as well. Right now it's set to the default, but if we make this to 0, now we can see the page below it entirely. Or maybe keep it a little more modern, fade a little bit lighter for our overlays. But the important thing to take away is to set the background color to 0% transparency, and then we're also going to go into the block, and we're going to add more columns here. So the columns that I brought in came in without a background color, and this is because at the block level we also have the transparency set to 0. So if there's no block background and there's no overlay background, the columns are determining the actual size of this overlay. So also, if I were to go in here and also remove the image from this column, now our overlay is even smaller. So it's really just being determined here by the size of this column, which we can manually adjust the handles of, so we can make it wider or taller, depending on the content that's inside of it, and how we want to adjust it using the handles from this column. So as you can see, By using this technique, we can determine the size of the overlay and to some degree where it will sit on the page as well. So now I want to add this narrow overlay to our hotspot that we created here in America. Now I'm going to link this hotspot to our overlay, to our additional text overlay. Now if we preview this, you can see it brings up our narrow overlay. After formatting your narrow overlay the way you want it to look, it's great to save them as overlay templates. Now that we have overlays saved as templates, when we go to create a new one, we can pull from our categories. Now, if we preview our pages 4 and 5, we can see we have a block here optimized for the different view modes. We have a Google map implemented using the Embed element. We have our data visualizations, and our other block with a big image which is set up to be responsive for tablet and mobile. And here we have our hotspot map with our block linking and our narrow overlay. And then at the bottom we have our footer, which can take us back to the home page. Now before we wrap up, I would just like to remind you that from the dashboard we have the Help Center down here, where you can browse our extensive Help Center for articles or chat directly with support. Now you have a well-rounded foundational knowledge of the platform. From here, I'd like to challenge you to jump into the editor and apply what you've learned in your next Foleon Doc. I can't wait to see what you create.